8 mice were placed inside a perfect world. 4 males, 4 females. No hunger, food that never ran out. No thirst, water that never ran dry. No disease, no predators. No threat of any kind from anything, ever. 5 years later, every single one of them was dead. Not from starvation, not from illness, not from a single cause any lab technician could point to under a microscope. The experiment was called Universe 25, and what happened inside it is still one of the strangest, most disputed findings in the history of behavioral science. The man behind it was John Calhoun, an American researcher who spent almost his entire career on one obsession. What happens to a population when you remove every obstacle standing in its way? Universe 25 wasn't his first attempt, it was his 25th. He'd built versions of this experiment in barns, in fenced enclosures, in laboratory rooms, going back more than 2 decades, always the same basic premise, a population with nothing to struggle against. And in every single one of those 24 earlier attempts, he'd watched the same pattern repeat itself: rapid growth, a period of chaos, then a collapse he couldn't fully explain. Universe 25 was supposed to be the version that finally proved what was actually happening. He built it inside a research facility in Maryland, a 9-foot square structure with stacked compartments running up every wall, connected by a mesh of tunnels the mice could climb through to reach food, water, and nesting space wherever they wanted it. By Calhoun's own calculations, the space could comfortably support close to 3,800 mice. It never came anywhere near that number. He placed 4 breeding pairs inside and sealed it. For the first 100 days or so, almost nothing remarkable happened. The mice explored, settled territory, and began breeding at a completely normal rate. The population doubled roughly every 7 weeks. By around day 315, more than 600 mice were living inside the structure, and this is the point where something in the colony started to break. In the wild, when a population outgrows the space that can support it, the surplus animals leave and find new ground elsewhere. Inside a sealed enclosure, there was nowhere to go, and so a strange new category of mouse started to appear: young males with no territory to claim and no role left to fill, who simply stopped participating. They gathered in loose, listless clusters near the center of the enclosure and did nothing. When they were attacked by more dominant males, they didn't fight back. They absorbed the aggression, walked a short distance away, and lay back down. At the same time, a completely opposite group emerged. These males moved constantly and aggressively through the colony, forcing their way into nests other mice were defending, ignoring the courtship behavior every other mouse in the enclosure still followed, and showing no response to being challenged or attacked in return. The females began withdrawing in their own way. The ones who couldn't secure a stable position in the increasingly chaotic social structure retreated to the highest, most isolated compartments in the enclosure and simply stopped engaging. No mating, no interaction, nothing. Calhoun documented something else happening at the same time, which he later called the behavioral sink. Even with food available at dozens of stations throughout the enclosure, the mice began crowding compulsively around only a handful of them. Not because there wasn't enough food elsewhere, but because the presence of other mice had somehow become part of the act of eating itself. An empty feeding station, no matter how well stocked, was functionally useless to them if no other mice were there. The most disturbing shift happened among the mothers. Defending a nest inside an increasingly overcrowded, chaotic enclosure took constant effort, and the males who might once have helped patrol and protect territory had largely stopped doing so. Mothers were left defending nests entirely on their own while still trying to nurse. Many failed. Nests were abandoned mid-litter. Some mothers stopped recognizing which pups were theirs. In the worst affected sections of the colony, fewer than 1 in 20 pups survived long enough to be weaned, and some mothers turned on their own offspring entirely. The generation that did survive grew up inside a colony that had, by Calhoun's own description, already lost its social structure even though the animals themselves were still alive. These young mice had no functioning adults to model behavior after, no mating rituals to learn, no territory disputes to understand, no defined role waiting for them anywhere in the colony. And when they reached adulthood, they did something none of Calhoun's previous experiments had ever produced. They simply opted out entirely. They didn't fight, they didn't attempt to mate, they didn't engage socially in any way at all. They ate, they slept, and they spent an enormous amount of time grooming themselves, which meant their coat stayed pristine since they never got into a single physical conflict. Calhoun named this generation the beautiful ones. From the outside, they looked like the healthiest mice in the entire enclosure. Functionally, their reproductive and social lives were already over before they'd begun. The population peaked at just over 2,200 mice around day 560, barely more than half of what the space could have supported, and never grew again. The last successful pregnancy inside Universe 25 occurred around day 920. After that, no new mice were born, ever. The colony didn't die violently, it simply aged in place. The beautiful ones kept grooming. The isolated females stayed in their high compartments, and one by one, with no younger generation coming up behind them, every remaining mouse eventually died of old age. By 1973, just under 5 years after the experiment began, the last mouse in Universe 25 was dead. Calhoun wrote that the colony had effectively died twice. The social structure, the actual functioning society of the colony, had collapsed long before the last physical body did. The population had a spirit, in his words, and that spirit had died first. When Calhoun published his findings, the takeaway most people walked away with was simple: comfort kills. A life without struggle destroys itself. That single image, the beautiful ones, flawless and functionally extinct, became one of the most widely borrowed metaphors of the following decades, cited by urban planners, religious leaders, and social commentators of every political stripe, almost always in service of the same warning about the dangers of modern comfort. But that reading leaves out most of what Calhoun actually argued. His real conclusion wasn't about comfort at all, it was about roles. He believed that a healthy population needs enough meaningful positions to fill, enough territory to defend, enough purpose to serve, enough of a functional place in the structure of the group, and that once the number of individuals outgrew the number of available roles, breakdown wasn't just possible, it was, in his own assessment, close to inevitable. The mice in Universe 25 never ran out of food or water. What ran out was something nobody had thought to build into the design in the first place, a reason for each individual to actually matter to the group around it. What almost never gets mentioned alongside the beautiful one's image is that Calhoun didn't spend the rest of his career predicting collapse. He spent it trying to prevent one. He kept building new versions of the experiment, adjusting variables, searching for whatever it was that could be added back into a resource-rich environment to keep it functional. He believed, and argued in his later writing, that as physical space and physical roles become scarce, complex creatures, humans specifically, have an option the mice never did, to keep generating new roles that don't depend on physical territory at all. New ideas, new structures, new reasons to be needed by the group around you. Universe 25 is still sitting there in the historical record, a perfectly resourced world, 8 founding mice, a 5-year timeline, and a total extinction with no toxicology report that could ever explain what actually killed them. The mice never got a say in what their world looked like. We still do. This file stays open.